Hello, welcome to, I want to say this month's LinkedIn Live, but I'm actually having two in the month of August of all months. Typically, I have these every last Wednesday of the month at noon Eastern, where we talk about how to turn your expertise into recurring revenue. And somehow AI has become part of this entire mix. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. So this is being recorded. Depending on how it turns out, it may also be released as an episode of my podcast, but you can always find the recording on LinkedIn. And so, as some of you may know, I almost always have a delay. I've even changed the type of streaming program that I'm using when you ask questions. And so at the end, I sit here and I wait for your questions. Then I turn it off. I go to LinkedIn, and your questions are sitting for me, waiting for me there. But I'd much rather reply to them here if I can. So please understand that there is a bit of a delay. It seems it may be as much as 5 minutes. So if you have questions, please ask them as they come to you, and don't wait for the end of the program. I'll talk to you for about 15 minutes, and then uh, have answer your questions. So, shadow AI. I know it's a little bit alarming. I like it lurking in our productivity software, but I was inspired by this topic and why I'm having a mid-month LinkedIn, because it just kept coming up in connection with all the SaaS tools that we use. We use them all day, every day. I'm using one right now as I record this, and or stream this, and we don't always know what AI is being used. Now we know that you know it is everywhere. Um, these days, I can't imagine that there's any software that doesn't have some sort of AI functionality. And but the question is, like, are we aware of it? I mean, AI has been around for ages. We're all aware of it now because we can access it as consumers through platforms like ChatGPT. But software developers have been using it for ages. Anytime you have done anything where that auto completes or edits your work or checks for grammar or your spelling, that's all AI. And so that's been around. But now it's crept into every aspect of the software that we're using. And as we continue to just renew the software that we've had for ages, like for instance, Windows, Microsoft Windows, Microsoft Office, I should say, suite I've used for I don't even know how long. How long it's been around? That's how long I've used it. And have I looked at any changes in how they're using AI? Like, do I have any idea what that functionality is? And even though I'm sure they're not being sneaky about it, I don't really know about it unless I'm going back and looking at those terms again. So that's what we're going to be talking about today, and how it has become part of pretty much everyday SaaS products. And so one of the ways that it came up was, I'm actually going to go to this other one first. One of the ways that it came up is I was looking at Audience Point provides email analytics. And so you would imagine that, okay, they get access to my email and they analyze it and they send me the analysis back. And so I was reviewing their terms, their online license, their online terms. Like, you got to click the link at the bottom of the footer of their website, and it says terms of use. And I was reading it. It had like a pop-up come up at the top, and it was a press release about a new offer that they have. And it said, AI learning, machine learning, great new tool, all this new stuff. And I'm like, oh, well, let me click on that. And so I clicked on that press release. And it, you know, talked about the new program, and included was, this key feature and benefit. Now, this is a press release. So this is a new offer. And so one of the benefits of it is this predictive analysis that leverages 700 million historical email address data from 160 plus enterprise partners to forecast future patterns and inform strategic decisions. Sounds great, except, and I'm not accusing Audience Point of anything. It's just made me wonder, where did all these 700 million email addresses come from? And who are these 160 enterprise plus enterprise partners? And, you know, did they enter licenses with all of them? How did that happen? Just to think about. Now, this one, they're very proudly proclaiming the AI, so there's nothing shadow about that, this new offer. However, um, how did they, get access to all that stuff? That's a training data issue. But just so you know, like that, even though everyone is now using AI in some way to provide analysis of some sort. So just to think about that. So, but I really wanted to, what really got me going on this was just another thing that sparked my desire to do this LinkedIn Live. But the real thing that really was getting my goat, honestly, are the note takers. And that when I'm having consultation calls, that people want to bring in particular, their Otter.ai note takers. And I do not let them in. And I'm going to tell you why I don't let them in. So I'm going to go back to the Otter. This is from Otter.ai's FAQs, where you can ask the question, do you use recordings and transcriptions to train your models? And their answer is that they de-identify user data, and so that an individual user cannot be identified. You'll note that they do not say that they don't use your recordings and your transcriptions to train their models. That's because they do use your recordings and your transcriptions to train their models. And I know that there's lots of anxiety about what we put in as prompts when we're using something like ChatGPT. I've talked ad nauseum lately about that. And if you haven't listened to my other, I'm pretty sure I did LinkedIn Live. Certainly I've done podcasts about what we disclose when we are using the ChatGPTs of the world, and that those prompts might be used as training data. There are options for how to get out of that. Again, that would be one of my former LinkedIn Lives. But I have not talked about something like this, where we're thinking about ChatGPT as being the prompt, what do we put in there? But are we thinking about our entire conversations that are being recorded by our note takers as being one big giant hour long prompt for use as training data for someone's platform? And so I want you to be aware of that. So note takers, believe me, I am currently in search of a note taker that I can feel really good about. As a lawyer, I do have obligations to keep information confidential. If I'm having conversations with you using note takers that aren't secure, then I am breaching that obligation to you, which is why I do not allow Otter AI into my calls with clients. But there are some, I believe, Fathom's what I'm looking at right now. I understand they do not use your transcripts at all as part of their training data. And so if you use Zoom or other, web conferencing tools and to discuss, things that you might not want to have be included in somebody else's training data, then we need to be mindful of this. So that will, let's talk about, a few risks. And I'm going to talk about note takers in particular. I mean, obviously, this would apply to things like, email, analysis and things like that. But let's talk about note takers in particular, which is probably one of the, main productivity tools that everyone is super keen to use. And I'll also confess that I had a client call a couple of weeks ago that was just filled with details that I really, really wish that I had a recording of. I didn't have a recording of it, and I didn't have a note taker, and I am going to fix that. So I get it. I totally 100% get why we want to have these note takers, but we do want to be careful when we're using them. So, some of the risks. One, the obvious one, that anything that is recorded by that note taker is one giant prompt that might be used to train their models. And so we don't want to accidentally expose confidential information by having these conversations when a note taker is listening. Also, don't forget that generative AI is generative. And so, one thing is a transcript. You can always go and get your transcript, and hopefully it's a good quality one and it's word for word. But a lot of times we're using these note takers in order to create summaries and to create to-do lists and to do things. We would like that functionality. That's why we have these, so that we don't have to scroll through, 20 pages of script and ums and uhs and, and all that other good stuff. We want that summary. We want that, to-do list. We want that action plan to come out of it. But when it's generative, it can make mistakes. We know that generative AI makes mistakes. And so it may make a mistake when creating your summaries, your to-do lists, your action plans. And then there's kind of a thing that we don't talk about too much, but that that the training data, when it's being generative, it needs to rely on its training data, and that has some inherent biases. Now, this was kind of interesting. I just came across this and I posted it, what's today, Wednesday? I think it was Monday, but it could be yesterday. But in any case, the second week of August, about how someone had put in a prompt, and this was for to create an image about, and I wish I could remember which one it was in. And they put in a prompt to have a room full of greedy publishers. And this was about publishers licensing the books that they publish to AI platforms. And so the concept was that publishers are being greedy because they are licensing your books to AI platforms. And so in order to create a image to go with the article that was written, she'd put in this prompt to create an image of greedy publishers. And all of the people depicted in that image were white men. And so an example and then somebody else did it, and they got different people. And so don't forget also that what comes out of it will be influenced by whatever inherent biases there are in that training data. And that is not something I talk about too much, and maybe I will do more of that in the future. So let's talk about some best practices. I mean, this stuff, this stuff, guys. We always need to read our terms of use. I am guilty of it. We're all guilty of it. How many of us read our terms of use? How many of us read it? If you look at those terms of use, you'll see that they can update them at any time, and they'll update it by posting it there. Well, who goes back? Even if you read it the first time, let's say you read it the first time when you sign up and you subscribe, do you ever go back to look at the updates? Zero, I think 0% of the population does that. So one of the things to be thinking about is when, either, maybe you can't go back and look at, all the terms of use of, your entire tech stack. For some of us, it's way too long. But when things are coming up for renewal, absolutely make sure you go back and look at the terms of use, see what's changed for all the software in your tech stack. Make sure you understand confidentiality obligations. If you're having conversations on Zoom or wherever with your clients and you want to use a note taker because of all the fabulous functionality of note takers, make sure that you understand and that the client understands what the implications may be of using that note taker. And of course, preferably you find one that does not use the conversation as training data. Always make sure any personal data is removed. So even though, for instance, Otter says that they do remove all personal data and that all individual user identification is removed, best practices still tell us that it's not fail-safe. In the legal review world, when we use legal contract review templates, contract review AI platforms, and we're going to put in an entire contract to be reviewed by AI, the best practices always tell us to remove the information of our clients, any client information, the other side's information, any business terms, that those are removed, because you just never know. And then never use note takers when discussing trade secrets. And so if you're going to, talk about changes that you're going to make to the Coca-Cola recipe, don't use note takers for that, right? Trade secrets are a very special form of intellectual property. Copyrights, trademarks, patents, and then trade secrets is another type of intellectual property. It's not just confidential, but there's an extra layer of protections when it's a trade secret as defined by statute. And you can hear more about what is the difference between confidential information and what is a trade secret, like the Coca-Cola formula, like the Kentucky Fried Chicken formula, like Google's algorithm. You can find out the difference, and that is in episode 27 of Hourly to Exit, if you want to find out more about that. And then also, again, because generative AI is generative, it might make an error. And so unless you're going to go back and compare, the summary and everything against the transcript, you need to be mindful that there could be, hopefully not a hallucination, but maybe, but there may be just some misunderstanding. We've all seen them. We use ChatGPT and other things, and we see the errors. We might even put something in just for it to summarize. I've done that, and they didn't summarize it right. So you want to make sure that you aren't just taking whatever the output is from that note taker and assuming that it is completely correct and is an accurate summation of the conversation that you had. So that is what I wanted to cover with you today. As always, I love hearing from you. If I don't get your question before I sign off today, I will find it in LinkedIn and make sure to answer it there. And also, always feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. And I don't think my LinkedIn is on this last slide. It's not. But you can always connect with me on LinkedIn. You know where to find me if you're here watching the stream today, or if you're watching this as a recording. And always happy to see you. And I will be back again the last Wednesday of August, which is the 28th, to talk about a great topic with my good friend Erica Holthausen. So thank you and see you soon.